What's up, everybody? Welcome to the CanesInSight Daily Podcast powered by Anajar and Levine Accident Attorneys. Happy Friday. It is game day eve, one day away from what we've been waiting for 2 decades. Fired up beyond belief. I'll be flying out there later, and it's going to be a special day, man. Already a lot of Canes fans getting there. I see a lot of pictures from the airport. See, obviously, pictures of the team that's already there in College Station, ready for the showdown, high noon Eastern time, 11 a.m. local. And it is going to be the show of the weekend, best game of the weekend nationally, and a perfect showcase for how far this program has come since that first trip to Kyle Field in 2022. Very fitting, because that was the sort of the big debut of the Mario Cristobal Hurricanes. Now we'll see what the progress has shown for this program. Always shouting out Anajar and Levine Accident Attorneys. If you or someone you care about has been injured in an accident, you could be entitled to significant compensation. Dial 1-800-747-FREE, 1-800-747-3733. Take back control of your life with Anajar and Levine. Yeah, man, it's Lance Roffers Day, Lance. So we'll be talking about the X's and O's of this matchup as let me text them here. Just dropped out. There he is. There's Glance. We'll bring him in real quick. Going to be a huge, huge show. Again, just if you listen to Lance Roffers, a lot of times you hear what's going to happen on Saturday ahead of time. Most recently, that wheel route to Malachi Toney out the backfield against Pitt. Talked about it on Friday. Saw it on Saturday. It was a 6-point play. Hopefully some more 6-point plays dialed up by the professor. Brought to you by Cannata Financial. It is upon further view with none other than Lance Roffers. Lance, how we doing?
Hey, guy. I'm excited. I'm excited for the first college football playoff game for Miami in this current format, and a big road game. I'm excited. My daughter's birthday is tomorrow as well, so it's a big day in the Roffers household overall, and hopefully the Canes will bring us a win. How you doing?
Doing great. Happy birthday, Princess Roffers. Is that going to interfere with game day watching? Because it's right there kind of in birthday timing at 11 o'clock your time.
Yeah, it absolutely will. Got to play the dad card, and we'll probably either be following on my phone or DVR and kind of watch it another time. But anything for the princess, right?
Wow, look at that. Hopefully that good karma translates on the field. I would have been moving that thing till midnight, just so I can do post games and celebrate appropriately. But
I got five 10 and 11-year-old girls coming to celebrate my oldest. So I'm gonna have my hands full. Maybe I'll escape and watch it on my phone somewhere. So
there you go. So Lance, you've had 2 weeks to break this one down, so more time than usual. We talked about, last week, some of the initial sort of thoughts you saw with Texas A&M. Now, with the ability to dive deeper, what are some of the things just this week that's kind of percolating your brain of what might play out on Saturday, key matchups? Just what's front and center on your mind with another week to chew on this thing?
Yeah, I think the thing that continues to kind of like show up whenever you review this game, right, is the importance of Miami getting off to a good start, right, and making it to where they don't get into where they're in only trail mode. Open it up where Texas A&M can unleash some of those pressure packages. Got to stay out of those 3rd and long situations, right, where Texas A&M is going to try and hunt. I mentioned on last week's show, but Elko has really cut his teeth, right, on his pressure packages, both on his simulation that he does with his fronts, as well as the games that they play as far as stuns and actions up front, movement, some of the long gapping where maybe you'll see individuals where it's not just a straight stunt, right, where they just replace one another, but you can actually see some of these edge players go from C gap to A gap, and some of your interior players go from A to C, things along those lines. And that's really where they're trying to create confusion and disruption up front. Sometimes they get, sacks and some of those plays. Other times it's tackle for a loss and in the backfield, things along those lines where they're really trying to get you behind the sticks. If Miami can avoid those, and I think they're built to do so, right? Don't get me wrong. I think they are built to be able to do so. But if Miami can avoid those things, I do believe that they're set up to control the game, right? Where you basically you're able to control the ball, get a lead, force Marcel Reed to kind of be more of a throwing, pocket passing quarterback. And Miami, with some of the advantages that they have, with their offensive line, with their backs, I believe they can stay on schedule in those ways, and that's going to be their big path to victory. On defense for Miami, I really kind of looked at what Texas A&M does. They run a little bit of a different offense than is typical in today, where they're not just attaching a bubble to everything with their RPOs. When Texas A&M does an RPO, it's generally to fix a numbers problem in the box, right? So where they don't have the numbers in the game, so they're going to try and move you defensively with some of the RPO actions that they have. And what I mean by that is they can stretch a defense horizontally. So you can give a bubble action, or you can give a slip screen action, or you can give kind of those horizontal motions that you see from running backs a lot of times now, and that pulls a player out of the box, right? So when I say fix a numbers problem, that's kind of what I mean, right? Where they're just basically counting what's in the box, identifying what they have as far as leverage and numbers go. The second thing that they're really trying to do is they're really trying to punish space issues out on the perimeter, right? So if, let's say, Texas A&M does throw maybe a diamond or a 3x1 stack to the field side, and Miami tries to play that maybe straight up and not, leverage an additional defender out of the box and towards that 3x1 look, and that's when they'll run RPO looks and try and punish the defense for not having accountable in that space. So those are kind of the two things. As I kind of looked at them more, I saw there were some differences with them. The other thing that really kind of just continues to, as I look through A&M and what they do, overall they're averaging allowing 5.0 yards per play and about 310 yards a game. But at home, that number drops to about 4.36 yards per play and 258 yards per game. So it really does tighten up when they're at home in College Station. They really kind of use that crowd, against the offense. And you see that play out in the numbers. Saban would tell you that they also use those speakers, against the offense at College Station there. So that run defense, another thing, about 1,500 yards in 12 games, about 127 a game for them. But the splits show they're gashed so much more on the road and in neutral games. At home, they've really been a lot stingier. One of the things that they do at home that I've seen is they really reduce their fronts a lot more. This is an opponent adjusted, right? So you kind of have to look at that too, right? If you're playing Delaware, you're probably going to play them a little bit differently than, maybe if you're playing Alabama. But for Texas A&M in particular, they really like to toggle their front between 4 down, odd spacing. What I mean by that is basically you can have like 3-man spacing, 4-man spacing. Obviously, the 4-man is what you're going to hear. Even spacing, 3-man, you're going to hear odd spacing. Essentially, your nose in those situations are going to be responsible for 2 gaps unless you inject from the second level. When I talk about reducing the front, what you do is you set your 3-tech and your 4-eye inside more. Sounds like, right? It's reducing the defensive line, closer splits, and then what that really does is help to choke.
Hold on, Lance. Let me just stop you right there.
Against 11 and 12. My camera looks like.
Let me stop you right there real quick because you're having a little bit of delay. So I want to just catch you up here while you're catching up. Shout out the arena. Landed in Texas. Go Canes. Appreciate you. JVP October. Appreciate you. I know you're down there in College Station. Hope you go 2-0 this weekend. So Lance, before you get rolling, I want to clarify one thing you said or expand on one thing you said. I want you to expand on it because to me, this is sort of the identity of Texas A&M. And we've heard this from a lot of different coaches over the years. I think of Art Briles and his whole tree talking about this. But really with Texas A&M's personnel, I think they've really been able to do it at a high level. You heard John Gruden talk about it when he was breaking down this game. He liked the Canes in this matchup, but this is how he described Texas A&M's offense is the whole every blade of grass. And you alluded to it. Horizontal and then vertical. What is explain to Canes fans when you hear that using every blade of grass, horizontal, vertical, what that means generally, and then how it applies to this game and the personnel that Texas A&M brings to the table on offense?
Yeah, I think in many ways that's kind of intuitive, right? So where a lot of offenses, what they're trying to do is when they line up, they're essentially going to be static in one direction or the other, right? So they're going to be if you line up in a bunch type formation, right? What you're trying to do is you're trying to create opportunities in an area of field, either downfield or, in some sort of like short, quick passing game, right? What Texas A&M is doing, they allow the defense to really kind of dictate what the play is going to look like from a lot of their receivers, right? We call those options in many ways. And you can also kind of talk about the RPOs, but they fall under options in my mind. So a lot of times you're going to have like maybe a tight split with a Mario Craver, some of those individuals who is basically like 3-4 yards off of the right hip of your right tackle, for instance. And he's just reading that leverage, right? So if you line up in a certain coverage look, he may take that horizontal, right? He may just drift down the line of scrimmage, and then they take advantage of the college rules where if you throw the ball behind the line of scrimmage, you can block downfield, right? In the pros, it's not really that way, but in the college game, if you throw that ball behind the line of scrimmage, you can be blocking downfield the whole time. And Texas A&M really takes advantage of that, especially with Mario Craver in particular. He's a player that really stood out for me as I watched them. I really like that player quite a bit. I saw he re-signed with Texas A&M.
Biggest contract extension in history.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah. So that's what we're doing in college now. But so that's what I mean by stretch you horizontally, right? So they'll basically punish you if you are trying to adjust for the vertical space of things, right? Well, if you play your defense with leverage and you're trying to account for, some of those horizontal stretches, really allow your defensive backs to be able to attack downhill and tackle, that's when they take advantage of you with the vertical shots, right? And what they'll do, and what I saw on tape with them quite a bit, is out of that same bunch look that I just talked about, right, where they stretch you horizontally. Well, now they actually keep 1 or 2 extra in, and they'll max protect, right? And they're trying to dial up vertical shots now, right, where they can protect Reed, give him maybe an extra second. And that's when they go hunting for those explosives in 2 different ways, right? So they're really looking for, your typical, when you think of like a 9 route outside, right? Vertical routes. That's one thing that they really are trying to hit. And you got to play that honest. You also got to have, safeties who are identifying where the help is needed in those, right? Whether you're in cover 3, cover 1, cover quarters, whatever your coverage is, you got to have your safeties who are communicating and identifying where they need to get deep. But additionally, now as I kind of talk about that bunch look, right, which is something that Texas A&M really likes to get into and dial up those explosives, they also try and hit you with those seam shots, where now you've leveraged yourself to identify and take away some of those horizontal shots, but now they're trying to hit you with the seam, right? So maybe you've adjusted your defense 1-2 yards outside further than what you typically would have. Maybe your apex defender, which I kind of talked a little bit about last week, is a little more outside than typical, and now you've opened up your seams a little bit. And they really like to hit those vertical shots in the seam. They've got a really good tight end who I believe doesn't get talked about enough. You've really got, those 3 wide receivers, but you've also got, a tight end that I believe is an NFL player for Texas A&M as well. And he really eats on some of those stick routes, but also those seam routes out of that same bunch route that I just talked about. And then kind of not really a vertical shot, but another thing they really love to do out of that horizontal, and really as another counter or tendency breaker from that horizontal stretch that I talked about, they really love to run leak. And what leak is like where you have that same bunch formation. Maybe you have an attached tight end. When I say attached, he's on the line of scrimmage outside of the hip of the tackle, or maybe he's a sniffer, which is essentially just offset of the hip of the outside tackle. And what he does is he stock blocks, right, which is maybe a couple of quick stock steps and hands, like they're getting ready to, attack a defender as a blocker. And what the blocker then, of course, identifies is that the defender identifies is that he's blocking him, right? When in reality, what he's trying to do is fake him. And then once the defender goes past him, he releases the opposite direction, right? And we call that leak. And that play is very effective for Texas A&M as well. They run that with not just Craver, but or not just the tight end, but with Craver, with Concepcion as well at times. But they're most effective with it with their tight end. I look for Texas A&M to try and hit one or two plays out of leak in this game when Miami gets aggressive on those horizontals. Maybe even gets tired of seeing those 5-6 yard plays from Craver out of those screens, and then they run leak.
Yeah, and what scares me with Texas A&M is their personnel really fits what you're talking about. So you have not just one tight end, number 87, the transfer from Nebraska, but they also have that Swedish guy, number 17. I see them as pretty similar in what they can do. So they're operating in the middle. You got a big back that can hurt you in the middle. And then in terms of the horizontal and the vertical with the receivers, a lot of times, Lance, and I know you've seen this, is sometimes the guys that are vertical are not necessarily that good in space, right? They might be long striders. They're guys that get down the field, but if you throw them a screen, they're not necessarily going to do something after the catch. They might have long speed, but they're not going to break tackles. They're not going to have contact balance. They're not going to have side to side. Unfortunately, with these guys, is you throw them a screen, they're very much like running backs. Even Craver, who's a lighter guy, we saw him against Notre Dame, breaking all those tackles and doing all that. Concepcion really like a running back more than a true wide receiver. But so that vertical they can do because they're fast, and they can track the ball. But then on those little, anything horizontal, those now routes, whatever they do, they're like running backs. So I think that's kind of unique, right, with what Texas A&M brings to the table.
Yeah, we talked about this last week as well, right? Their receiver room, when you talk about the top three wide receivers, which is really what you're going to look at with a receiver core in a playoff game, right? How good your seventh wide receiver is nice through the season, but in a one game, I'm looking at your top three, right? And then when you also bring in those tight ends, like you've talked about, they really have two that are pretty good, but I really especially like their starter. I think it's 87, like you mentioned.
Yeah, 87.
So I really like those 5 players, but then their running back, they're kind of like small guy that has been taking place of their big Punisher while he's been hurt. He's also pretty decent in the pass game as well. But those top 3 wide receivers plus those 2 tight ends, I put them up with any team in the country outside of Ohio State. I feel like all 3 of them are able to, they play inside, they play outside, they're quick after the catch, they're strong, they're tough, they can get vertical. I really haven't seen a huge problem with drops. Concepcion will every once in a while take his eye off things, and try and look downfield just a little bit. But even in that regard, they play smart. I believe they attack the football, which is another thing I really want to see out of any wide receiver, right? Is hands, attacking the football, coming back to it, things along those lines. They're very good at all of those things. Which is why they're in the playoffs, right? Which is why they've got a home game in the playoffs, because they're talented. They're a good team. I've talked about it all year long. The good losses thing really has driven me crazy because to me, a good loss just means that you can lose to playoff teams. Great. Okay. What I want to know is who can you beat? Because when you who do you beat as far as good teams? Because that's what you're going to play in the playoffs. You're not going to play like decent teams. You're not playing mid-tier ACC teams. You're playing a good team. Texas A&M's great, a great team. In fact, I thought they were underranked. I thought they should have been ahead of Ole Miss in particular. And, I would have loved a matchup with Ole Miss quite a bit more than a matchup with Texas A&M, quite honestly. But we're where we are. We're playing who we're playing. They're very talented. They're very good. But, I've only talked about their good so far. I haven't talked about some of the inconsistencies that they've had over the last 4 weeks.
And we're going to get to that before we get to that. A couple things I want to get to, because I want to talk.
Keep me on task.
I'm keeping you on task. You're rolling. A couple things. First of all, I want to know a nickname you want, because I got here from Left Perf. He's got the Oracle of the Ozarks. I like that one. The Sage of Springfield, the Mahatma of Missouri. Let's go, Kane. So which of those do you want to roll with?
You know what? You don't pick your own nickname, right? Somebody else picks it for you. So you guys, you make me laugh. I love watching the comments and seeing those things kind of come in. I've already got one, right, with Glance Roffers.
That's right.
That
we got to expand it.
Too,
Right?
Yeah,
it's like Babe Ruth. He had
all that stuff,
7.
If you want me to be real with you for just a second, I mean, it's super humbling that, people give a darn what I have to say or even think. Never really would have thought that would be the case, as you do this for fun, right? People who don't know my story too much, you and I, we didn't know each other, right? I just started writing on the board, and you just reached out to me and said, hey, I kind of like what you're doing. Do you want to, maybe do this more and talk to me and that kind of stuff. So it's not like we were boys growing up, and here we are. It's kind of fun. Any of that stuff's cool with me. I'm good with any of that stuff. It's kind of funny. I like the Oracle, the Ozarks, Sage of Springfield. Yeah. I don't know what a Mahatma is. So,
I think it's an Indian thing or like a Hindu thing.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Wait, but real quick though, Lance, before we get into the weaknesses, I want to talk Keontae Scott and his impact on the return, or his return on impact on the defense, what we just talked about. Let's talk about Cannata Financial and tell everybody about who's bringing this segment to us and what they're all about. And by the way, he'll be here.
You know what? I just talked to him on the phone yesterday, actually, and we kind of talked about it. He's bringing his wife out. They're both attend the games together. They're both big Canes fans. But our buddy at Cannata Financial, CannataFinancial.com. Right now he's running a special. Typically, like your CFO package, for your small business is going to be $1,995. Right now, if you mention CanesInSight when you give him a call, he's got a deal on that for $995. Really, what we're trying to do right now is set up you and your small business for 2026 through CFO, type work, right? You've got funding, profitability, you've got bookkeeping, budgeting, forecasting. Maybe you really want to set up a plan for where you spend your time. Where do you focus? Where's your margin growth going to come from? What is your plan overall for just the growth of your company in 2026? I know what I do in my day job right now. We're looking at our AOP, which is a fancy word for just our operating plan in 2026. And small businesses need to do the same. And not everyone who's running their small business is an expert in that or likes to do those things, right? So let's let our friend at Cannata Financial handle that for you. And when you give him a call, remember to mention CanesInSight and get that deal, and he'll get you set up.
Yeah, man. No, shout out to Sebastian. Hope to see him there in College Station. Pete's already on the way. I'll be out there later. Our guy Canes Cat's on the same plane, so he's on the stream, on the plane, getting ready for the game. Also, shout out to Gambit, man. Appreciate your support. Thank you for everything you do, supporting the show and tuning in every day, every week, man. Appreciate you guys. Remember to like and subscribe if you are new around here. So, Lance, before we move on to some of the weak spots of Texas A&M.
Yeah, before we move on to the weak spot, let me jump in real quick.
Please.
Your commenters, man, they give Pete a hard time. My man Pete, he can't live down some of the past year mistakes, can he? Like they remind him of all the things, don't they?
He moves the needle. He's got him talking. That's the key to the game right there. He's got him hot. He's got him cold. He's got him every which way. So shout out to Pete. He'll be there. Hopefully post game Pete after a win at College Station, live on location, celebrating. So I want to talk about the big story from an injury perspective of this game, at least on the Miami side. Keontae Scott at the nickel position. I think Miami's done a great job without him, playing some of their best football, but obviously the challenge now increases. He was listed as probable, which means he's going to play. Everything I've heard, he's going to play. Who knows how effective he is? No one really knows until you actually see him out there changing directions and doing that. So that will be seen once he's there. No one really, who knows, right? You've seen this story before, but let's assume.
Can we talk about his injury? Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, but look, he has foot injury, right? He's a turf toe. I think that's been publicly disclosed, but he's probable, which means he's progressing at a fast rate that he's going to play. They wouldn't put him out there if he was a liability. We'll see how it moves when it's 100,000+ people and guys are flying, running 4.3s, and he's doing it. But let's assume that he's effective. Maybe it's limited snaps, whatever. Let's just assume he's effective. Just how important is that nickel position and what he does when you are facing 3 receivers similar size to him that can all make explosive plays both after the catch with a short pass or down the field?
Yeah, Heatherman builds his whole his whole defense around the star position, which is that nickel. He is the star of the defense. Everyone plays their part. Everyone has a role. Don't get me wrong. And I know the coaches that are listening right now that'll eat them up. But the star position, that apex defender, and what Heatherman is doing is so important because he just allows him, to flip and replace and insert and use creepers and blitz Scott, and Scott can take a gap. I mean, it is unusual to have a nickel who can take a gap in the run fits and not be a support player or a force player in the run fit. I mean, there are plays all over the film where Scott is actually responsible for the C gap and, whatever blocker comes out there, whatever runner comes out there, and trying to get him on the ground with, only 3rd level support. And so it's huge to get Scott back. In my mind, I felt like he was the MVP of the defense outside of probably Bain, because Bain's just such a game wrecker on film. But, when you've got a Mesidor and a Bain and a Moten and, a Lucas and all the players that they got on defense, and you're talking about Scott as maybe the MVP of it, getting a player like that back for this type of game is also a lift for everyone else, right? He's just that kind of player where he's gone through these battles in the SEC. He's performed on some of these, large stages in the past. He's performed in this defense all year long. And, not that Fitzgerald isn't going to be a star, but Scott already is in my mind, and getting him back is just huge. Even if it's 20, 25, 30 snaps, you use him judiciously, put him in on certain plays where, you really need an individual that can communicate and who has been there. I feel a lot more comfortable with a Keontae Scott than a true freshman in that role of the apex defender in this defense. So to me, that's a huge deal, getting Keontae Scott back. His tackling ability is really a separator for me as well right now. I think Fitzgerald, as he fills out and gets older, will become a better tackler. But right now, I wouldn't call that his main strength. Not that he's bad at it, but I wouldn't call it his main strength. And for me, Scott is, he's a feisty little guy out there in the role, he kind of reminds me of like that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson type with maybe, not some of the off-field personality kind of stuff. And that's a role that can just be huge in these kinds of games with his energy as well. So super excited to get Keontae Scott back for this game.
And just let's assume he's not going to play the full game like he's played, right? So let's just say he plays limited snaps. How do you see those other snaps being filled against this particular matchup?
Yeah, I mean, you'll probably see what you've seen over the last several weeks, right? Where it's a little bit of a hybrid, right? We've seen Fitzgerald for, 60, 70% of those snaps. We've seen Pruitt, in specialized spots where maybe they want just a little bit bigger body in some of those places. I've been impressed with Pruitt. I feel like he's handled, those added responsibilities well. But for the most part, those are the players that they've used to replace that role. They have used Poyser there a little bit. But Poyser has really kind of taken off over the last month to 6 weeks and really been playing like the player I think they expected out of him. And so I like to have that versatility unlocked for Poyser to where you can kind of move him around and play him in different spots. But they've also kind of used, Jacoby Thomas there at times also. You saw him get some interceptions where maybe you don't think coverage is the first strength of his, but they've kind of used like a mashup. They haven't had just one player that's played, all the snaps, all the plays like Keontae Scott was before he got hurt. And they've done a great job of, kind of developing and using those players situationally. So I think you'll probably see that continue.
By the way, shout out to Recane Swag here. Love this hype video. Post a link in the chat. I'll promote it there. But one thing we've seen from the secondary, not just the nickel, the star, but also some of the safeties, saw really in the pit game. And I will say this is something that we talked about ahead of time on the show prior about maybe trying to keep Heinschel in the pocket as Pitt's quarterback with secondary blitzes, guys that can chase him down and tackle him while he is maybe contained a little bit by the power rush on the outside. That turned out to be the case. They sent a lot of defensive back pressure, and those were very successful against Heinschel. Reed's a little different animal in terms of he's more of a runner, right? He's not just going to scramble to throw. He's going to scramble to run. I think most of his rushing yards are, in fact, scrambling rushing yards. But do you see an impact of potential defensive back blitzes, trying to get Reed on the ground in a way that maybe the bigger defensive ends that Miami are not going to be as effective?
Yeah, you really have seen. I wouldn't call it a problem, but you've seen it on film at times where maybe our edges in certain situations, certain games have struggled to finish the play. Right, we've been able to get pressure, or we've been able to beat the lineman, but getting the quarterback on the ground at times has been a little bit of a problem. But I believe what you'll see in this game is what you've seen most of the year from Miami, right? You'll see a lot of Roscoe outside. And when I say Roscoe, it's rush outside, contain on the edge. And what you're trying to do there, right, is you're trying to avoid getting upfield, right? You're using more power and trying to pinch the pocket. And when I say pinch, think of those tackles kind of getting reset inside a couple of yards. And then you really need your interior players to also maintain their gap to where Reed can't just escape, and go upfield. That's what you're trying to avoid with Reed, is him, getting those easy lanes where your defensive end is behind the quarterback, right? And he's just got that quick step and it's a vertical run and go. And then I think you'll see, like you've seen all year, I think you'll see Miami insert creepers into their pressure packages. Heatherman is huge on sending 5 in, key situations. And the way that he sends 5 most of the time is by inserting a creeper. You're either inserting your backside safety or your front side safety, whichever one he decides to do on that play, or you're inserting your star, your nickel player, which is Keontae Scott, right? And you can invert that, right? You can drop Scott out and then send your creeper from maybe a Jacoby Thomas, things like that. We've seen that this year. We've seen maybe a big nickel line up in that star, pre-snap, right? And then the Saint, maybe he lines up in that situation as your big nickel, and he looks like he's the star, but post-snap he's actually coming. And then Keontae Scott has rotated a lot into, that star role where he's kind of dropping out. That opens up a little bit of that quick game, but I haven't seen Reed be a super fast processor in those situations. And I think Miami will absolutely try and use creepers to get pressure, maybe backside on Reed, or to then replace. So maybe we've got a Lightfoot who's an edge as a stand-up, right? Pre-snap look. And then he drops into that glance or that quick horizontal, zone because he sees a 5-man, 6-man pressure. And then when you drop a Lightfoot, it actually becomes a 5-man pressure, but the offensive line has maybe slid to that side, which is exactly what Texas A&M does on film as well. Don't get me wrong.
With Howell, so he drops more than I thought. Howell does, number 9.
He does, yes. They absolutely want to drop into the glance, into that front side RPO, and try and trick you into turnovers, throw the ball into it. But it's not just for a turnover. It's also to get that quarterback to hold the ball another beat, and they've got a backside pressure, right? So I'll flip, and I'll take this to the Miami side, right? And what Texas A&M is going to do defensively. Elko is absolutely known for his fronts, his games that he plays with his fronts, right? And especially in some of those like 2nd and 9, 3rd and 7 situations where he'll boss his front, which is kind of overload to one side, right? And what he's really trying to get you to do is to get you to slide your offensive line protection to that direction, right? So I've got 3 offensive linemen to the right side. I've got a tight end as a sniffer. So I've got 4 blockers to that side. He's going to try and show 5, right? That in a boss overload, you don't know which are coming. They're not going to send all 5, from one side most of the time, but maybe he sends 3, and now you've allocated 4 blockers to his 3, and he sends a pressure package off the back side, right? It can be your Sam linebacker. It can be your weak side linebacker. Generally, you're not going to have 3 on there, so you're not going to have both a Will and a Sam. But let's say you did in that situation. Maybe they send them from the other side. And now it's your running back's got to identify it. He's got to see it. He's got to step up, and he's got to take that block on and allow your quarterback to have that extra beat, that extra pause in those situations, not just for the routes to develop because you dropped Hal into that front side look, right? Because everybody knows what your typical like outlet is against those pressure looks, right? It's the quick game to where the blitz is coming from. You're generally looking to replace the defender who's coming on a pressure package with the ball and your receiver, right? So the defense, especially Hal, has looked all year to get his hands into that zone or to get that quarterback to pause that extra beat. That backside pressure is coming now. The third thing that comes with that, right, is your pressure is getting there fast enough now that you're not getting routes that are able to get that full 7, 8, 9 yards on third downs, which is why Texas A&M has been so great on third down this year, because they can play those games up front and get your quarterback to see things differently post-snap than pre-snap. So that's kind of the way I see those tacticals go.
So we're going to get into the weaknesses here of Texas A&M. First, want to talk about my friends at KashKick, KashKick. Give your free time a raise. I know you're just trying to kill the time watching this show, getting ready for that kickoff, high noon tomorrow, Texas A&M. Spend that free time in a way that's productive and give your free time a raise with KashKick, KashKick in the App Store. 4.5 plus average rating, 1.5 million plus downloads, one of the biggest apps in the country. You download the app, it consolidates all your games that you like to play on your phone, whatever genre it is, while you're playing, while you're browsing, while you're just sharing your opinions, doing surveys. You are making money in the side, real money that goes into your PayPal. So why waste time? Have fun, but give that free time a raise with KashKick in the App Store. Download today. So, Lance, you previewed this a little bit, and you said there's some weaknesses that can be exploited here with Texas A&M. So let's talk about some of the ways that Miami can exploit those weaknesses, what those weaknesses are, where there might be personnel matchups, stylistic matchups that could favor the Hurricanes tomorrow.
Yeah, so A&M, they were top third for cover 1 usage. They ran it almost exclusively behind their pressures. They were 91st on usage. So really man and man match is their comfort zone, right? So you really are going to look for those man beaters. You're going to look for some of those switch routes to get them, to miscommunicate in the secondary. And that's something you see a lot. Texas A&M is vulnerable in their back seven. Particularly their linebackers have not been great in the intermediate coverage area. They have one linebacker who's kind of undersized, who really, runs around and makes most of their tackles, most of their plays. But their overall linebacker group, to me, is kind of mid. I don't think it's especially great. I think you can attack them in the intermediate area with some of your whips and mesh and, backfield routes where maybe your running backs running some arrow or running just some flat routes where they don't get out there quick enough, they don't replace quick enough. That's one of the areas I think you can beat them deep if you can block them up one-on-one outside. They're going to play that a ton. They're going to play man outside, and you're going to have to win outside, versus man match coverage, just straight cover one coverage in this game to hit some of those explosives against them. If you can block them up, though, they are vulnerable deep. I do also believe that their DBs don't tackle that well. I think you can attack them in, the run game and force those DBs to have to tackle over and over and over in this game. Their linebackers, you want to make them tackle over and over and over in this game as well. Because of all the front pressures all the games that they play up front, and they do a lot of those stunts, a lot of those X's, a lot of those long gaps like I talked about, you can hit them quick with your inside run game as well and get some explosives against them when they open up those gaps, right? The reverse is true too, right? Where they can get some of those chaos plays and tackle for losses. But if you are able to, control some of those games up front, you've also got the ability to really hit them in the run game with explosives. You're probably not going to just run and chew up 5, 6, 7 every time against them. But what you can really do is get a few of those 20-yard type runs in this game. And really you're hoping that maybe Pringle can, make it a 60-yard game. We haven't seen a lot of that this year. We did get one called back on a terrible, stoppage. I believe it was against Florida, but that's pretty much something we haven't seen a ton in this run game. I would love to get one explosive out of this game whenever Texas A&M gets out of their gap with some of the games they play up front. And then I'd love to control the intermediate area with some of our mesh game, some of our whip game. You can really get Malachi Toney on their nickel. I'm not especially impressed with him, quite honestly. I think he's a solid player. If you're starting in the SEC in a playoff team, you're probably pretty decent, but I don't think he matches up with Toney in a one-on-one. So if you do see them bracketing, that really is reducing a number and opening up opportunities elsewhere. So you're really hoping that Daniels is healthy and that, Marion continues some of his momentum and maybe hits one vertical shot in this game. He's really kind of been your vertical stand-in for the most part while Daniels was hurt. Maybe you see him get one in this game as well. You're looking at a 28-24, 31-28 type game, right? So one play can really swing, the outcome here. So I look for those things. I think Fletcher is going to play a big part in this game just because of how well he blocks. I think he's the guy that probably does a lot of those communication blocks for all the games that Texas A&M is going to play. I think he also really kind of sets the tone as far as, forcing those DBs to tackle, those linebackers to tackle, like I talked about, right? Your defensive linemen, they're going to tackle, right? That's what they do. They're 300 pounds. They fight, giant offensive linemen all day. They're not as concerned with the contact and the physicality of everything. But, some of your linebackers that are 210 pounds these days, are they going to want to tackle Fletcher all game if he gets 20 carries, that kind of thing? Are your DBs going to want to tackle if he's finding his way 5 yards downfield? Those are the questions that I would test Texas A&M on in the run game and make them, answer. And then in the intermediate game, I would just continue to spam those man beaters because they're going to run man. They're going to run man. They're going to run man match all game. They're one of the highest.
Yeah, on the man coverage, one of the things that I think makes sense when you look at how they play on film and then you match it with the statistical profile is interceptions. 125th in the country in interceptions per game. And obviously you're playing more man. You're not looking at the quarterback as much. You're going to have, just as a general rule, I know it can vary, but you're going to get less interceptions when you're not having eyes on the quarterback and you're out chasing dudes. So I think the way they play is obviously helps their pressure packages and allows them to be more creative there and maybe make up for not having the best personnel. Cassius Howell being a good player, but I don't think their personnel up front is what it was 2 years ago when Miami played them at the Rock, as far as first round, kind of second round NFL players. But obviously when they're playing so much man, they can be a little more creative with what they do on their pressure packages. But you see that one thing that we saw in the Texas game is the ability to run off tackle for Texas, a team that was not a very potent running offense the entire season. I think their only real good game running the football was against Texas A&M. Smaller defensive ends. Obviously, Miami's much bigger in terms of their tackles, but Miami was not a very good team running outside the tackles all year. I think schematically it's been well documented, but there's also stats to back it up. Miami and Baylor are probably the two teams that run inside the tackles the most in the country. It's just a schematic thing. And then personnel-wise, when you have so many carries for Fletcher and Marty Brown, they're not guys that you're going to try to stretch out. You have big tackles, but sometimes if you talk about some of the runs where they're going to be in space, they're not as – Mount Noah is, but Markel Bell maybe not as much. So there's some issues as far as running outside. But Gerard Pringle starting to come on. Malachi Toney, he is now a running threat. I mean, how many carries did he have against Pitt? It felt like they were pretty impactful, and you got to respect the passing, obviously, with what he does. Can you see Miami running outside the tackles more in this game because of the matchup, because of the maybe weaknesses for Texas A&M, and the fact that you have Malachi Toney going from 7 touches a game to maybe closer to 15, and Gerard Pringle becoming a key part of this running game?
Yeah, I think that you're going to continue to see Miami do what some of the alterations in the SMU game have been. I know I'm having a little bit of a connection issue, or at least it looks like it. So right. Sorry about that. But moving Toney around and running the offense through Toney. Toney has become the focal point of this offense. I think you touched on it a little bit as you saw his touches go from X to Y. And I think it's absolutely the right thing for Miami in this game because of the fact that you can move Toney and put him in some of those situations, anticipating man, like I talked about earlier, right? Anticipating that man match, right? Moving him into the backfield where he's a running threat, he's physical enough to insert as a blocker. So it's not, a reduction of one like it would be for maybe, some of these other small wide receivers that you motion and they're not actually going to be a part of the blocking scheme. They're either going to carry the ball or they're going to be a decoy, right? But then you can match up Toney on some of those like wheel routes, some of those, mesh, some of those rails on a linebacker typically, or on a safety. But if Texas A&M shows their hand on the way that they're going to cover that early, now you've got a tendency and a change to where you can anticipate save a play that's going to hit against that in a big spot, right? So I look for Miami to do that. Look for Miami to have a play saved off of that alignment where Toney and Pringle are in the backfield, right? Pringle, just by his nature, has better vision than the power backs that we have where we run a lot of duo, a lot of inside zone. And so it looks like he's attacking now outside runs more. But really what he's doing is just finding where the gap is a lot better than what some of our larger backs have done. Several times this year on some of my, articles that I write, I've identified, a running back just basically closing his eyes, right, and running into the back of someone or stopping his feet in the hole, right, instead of like just making the adjustment on the fly. The thing that's really stood out to me about Pringle and really impressed me about him and why I don't know, 5-6 weeks ago really planted my Pringle flag, the guy, and we should be running our run game through him as our engine, is because of the fact that he is not doing those things, right? He's not stopping his feet, if the initial like front side zone is not there, because in zone, it's not a designated gap, right? You're reading where you've got a read defender, you've got a backside defender, and you're trying to basically press a hole, get your backside defender out of his gap, and then hit behind it. We saw Pringle do that multiple times. I've highlighted it. I've even used some of those like ACC official, camera views on the way that looks, where you're getting a guy out of his gap by pressing a hole and then cutting it back. So it looks like you're running off tackle when in reality, you're just running the play, and Pringle's running it better than maybe earlier running backs did. I think you're going to continue to see that, but it's still an inside zone play. It's just an inside zone that, has a cutback, and Pringle's hitting the cutback because he sees it, he presses better, and then he's got speed to get outside. You really need to hit one or two of those as explosives in this game. You really need to hit one or two of those explosives in the pass game. And then you touched on it, Reed will absolutely get impatient and put the ball in harm's way. Miami has to capitalize on it, right? It's not enough to, get hands on it and then put your hands on your helmet because you dropped it, and everyone makes the joke about that's why he plays defense, right? In this game, you got to catch the damn ball. You've got to complete those interceptions and make sure that, when you get an opportunity, you're going to get it, because twice a game, Marcel Reed's going to put the ball in harm's way, and the game could, the result of it could hinge on, do you catch those two or do you drop those two? So I look for that in this game. I look to really contain on the outside edge with Roscoe, pinch, make Reed beat you from the pocket a little bit more. He will make some plays. He will frustrate you at times. He's a good player. Again, Texas A&M is a good team. I do honestly, I know I got to go in about like 5-10 minutes here, and I want to get to it. I honestly believe Miami matches up well in this game. I honestly believe if they were playing on a neutral field, it would be a no doubt Miami should win the game. Texas A&M at home, that gives you a little pause. They absolutely have a great home field advantage. The noise there is unbelievable. I've never been personally, but I have seen, every venue on television and heard the way they sound, read the feedback from individuals. It's a real thing. Kyle Field is a real thing. The crowd will be a real impact. You want to see them avoid all those false starts and the procedure penalties that the offensive line really struggled with early on. And that'll be a key in this game. Miami's got to handle their nerves in an environment like that. We all know they haven't played in an environment like that this year. It will be things get going, and once you get hit a few times, once you get through the initial scripts, right? I like to joke that a game starts once both teams have got their scripted drives out of the way, right? And now we can see what things are going to really be like. Hopefully we're ahead at the end of those scripts, but we'll see. And then from there, Miami matches up well in this game. The things they do well take away a lot of the things that Texas A&M does well. Where they're deep, where they're talented, Texas A&M's deep and talented. It should be a fun game. I've gone back and forth on this quite a bit. I've watched pretty much every game from Texas A&M the last couple of years now, and I'm going to pick Miami. I am a Miami fan, but I am not a Miami fan that's like, super optimistic all the time. And I have told you, I don't think Miami matches up well a couple of times this year. I do believe they match up well in this game. I do believe Mario teams have tended to be pretty good in the big games, right? The games against the name opponents. I'm having trouble speaking here. I do believe they come prepared in this game. I think it's close. I've got Miami winning 28-24. That's where I'm at right now. I look for another Tony big play out of the backfield. I look for a wheel or a flea flicker, to really cash in on one of those trick plays in this game when Texas A&M gets, into a tendency. I look for Miami to control the game early and hang on late.
There it is, man. The one and only Lance Roffers. Happy birthday to the princess. Thank you to Cannata Financial for making this happen. And, man, go Canes. Appreciate you. The Oracle of the Ozark.
Yeah, where are you at, Danny? I got to hear you. Where are you at?
I'm at Casa Cultura. Shout out to everybody with 786 Sports. I had I had some stuff set up here. So we're here, and then wheels up, baby, going to Texas A&M to College Station. And expecting a good game, man. It'll be a lot of fun.
Have a great trip. Bring us a win. You'll probably get a text from me either way. Thanks for having me. Thanks to Cannata Financial. Let's go. Go Canes. Go Canes.
One and only. The Oracle of the Ozarks, baby. The Sage of Springfield. There he is right there. Lance Roffers. Some news, transfer news. We're always going to get to that here on this show. We are a Tampa-in podcast on top of all the breakdown for the biggest game Miami's had in a long, long time. But first, I want to shout out a couple friends of ours here. I know one person who is going to be wheels up to College Station. That is the Orchid Man, ORCHID Man, South Florida's top landscape artisans. 786-271-0332 for all your landscaping needs. Residential, commercial, you name it, they will take care of you. 10% off your first service for a limited time. Only tell them you're from CanesInSight. ORCHID Man, Florida. This is whether you're trying to, spruce up your house, look the part, curb appeal, or whether it's a business situation, commercially. There's a ton of huge commercial project stuff that everyone in South Florida knows what it is. That is ORCHID, man, Florida. You've seen those OM trucks all over the city. They'll be your quarterback for the whole process. It's not just about, picking plants and the creative stuff. It is the down and dirty maintenance, irrigation, hurricane prep, all the stuff that you don't want to think about, that you wouldn't even think about. They've been through it a million times. Orchid Man Florida, ORCHID Man Florida.com. And then, of course, we're always going to shout out the number one Cuban restaurant on the planet. You're going to have a big party tomorrow for the game. Why don't you go to the catering menu at Islas Canarias Express? Right there, you get a little bit of everything. You can get assorted pastries, croquetas, you name it. They'll take care of you. You can just buy in bulk, show up to the party with the big platter, and you will be the star of the show. Maybe Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever it is that you are celebrating. Islas Canarias Cuban Express will take care of you with the catering menu. Show up there and do your thing, or just get some lunch. I might roll there for lunch right now. I'm down south. In fact, just got that idea right now. So if you want to catch me for lunch, I'll see you at noon at Islas Canarias Cuban Express in the Dayland Mall Dining Pavilion, because just doing this ad got me hungry for the number one Cuban restaurant on planet Earth. Josh Gross asking, going to go to College Game Day? No College Game Day for me. I'll be there for the game. It's going to be beautiful. Orange and Green Blood, good to see you. Question about Hollywood Smothers in the portal. This is the running back for NC State. Really, really talented player. Ran for big yards against everybody except for the Miami Hurricanes. I like him. I don't see him as a Miami fit, but we talked about CJ Bailey as a portal fit. They play at 2:30, by the way. So if you want to check out CJ Bailey, scout him against a pretty decent Memphis defense, see how he does. Hopefully he does well, right? Because we need quarterback options. A lot of guys jumping in the portal, but a lot of suitors for these portal quarterbacks. So the more quality options, the better. Hopefully he shows up and looks good. But Hollywood Smothers is his running back, who, again, was really, really good all year, except for against Miami. Him jumping in the portal, I think that NC State thing is a bit of a sinking ship. So makes him, to me, more likely that a CJ Bailey will jump in the portal. That was my big takeaway from that. I don't think Miami would get involved there, because we have Pringle, Fletcher. Hopefully they stay healthy and there's no issues. There it is. Oh, snap. Live from Montana, one day away. Good to see you catching alive. Real quick, portal news. Some big portal news that I wanted to get to. Seems like a new quarterback is jumping in the portal every single day. And there is yet another one. And it's a pretty big one. And that is Texas Christian quarterback Josh Hoover has officially jumped in the portal. There he's seeing number 10. Talented dude, man. Very productive. Throws the ball in harm's way a little bit, but he throws the ball a lot. He's a very productive passer. Look at last year's stats, really last 2 years. So as a sophomore, redshirt sophomore for TCU in 24, 67% passer, 3,900 yards, 39-49, 27 touchdowns, 11 picks. So he does throw the ball into harm's way, a healthy 8.4 yards an attempt. So he's throwing the ball downfield. He is a gunslinger. This year, pretty similar stats, 66% passer, 3,400 yards, 29 touchdowns, 13 picks again. So the 24 picks in 2 years. He does throw the ball into harm's way, but he is a talented passer, explosive arm, and Texas Christian's been a pretty decent team while he's been there. So he's going to be a guy with a lot of interest, right? He has Sorsby from the Big 12, another Texas quarterback, played for Cincinnati, but originally from Texas. Interesting. Both Sorsby signed with Indiana out of high school. Hoover was linked to Indiana out of high school in Rockwell, Texas, where he was a 3-star player. So there's a lot of Indiana ties. Indiana is going to be one of these teams that is in the quarterback market. A lot of people, and we've already seen this reported with Chris Hummer, who does a really good job of looking at some of these portal entries, portal movement, and he is already tying Josh Hoover to Indiana. They're losing Fernando Mendoza, obviously, to the draft. He'll be a top 5 pick. You have Alberto Mendoza at Indiana, who I think is a pretty good player. He actually runs better than his brother, not as big, but clearly they're looking at portal quarterbacks. At least that's been all the story. So, we'll see what happens with a Josh Hoover. I think Indiana is a fit because he is RPO heavy quarterback. That is something that he does quite a bit at Texas Christian. I believe really him and Mendoza are the two, top guys when it comes to RPO usage. So the fit makes sense. It's linked. If Josh Hoover were to go to Indiana, that would be another team out of the market for quarterbacks. They've been linked to Drew Mestamaker as well, the North Texas transfer. So let's say Hoover goes to Indiana. Let's say Brendan Sorsby from Cincinnati goes to Texas Tech, as has been rumored. Brendan Sorsby is dating a girl that played volleyball at Cincinnati who's now transferred to Texas Tech. He's from Texas. Texas Tech's got a lot of money. They're going to be in the portal quarterback market, so you could see why that's getting a lot of attention. But let's say those two things happen as predicted. You still got Sam Levitt coming out of Arizona State. Does he go to an Oregon where he's from? We'll see if Dante Moore comes back. That's a domino to monitor. But he's from Westland, Oregon. So does Sam Levitt go to Oregon? LSU is going to need a quarterback. Does a Trinidad Chambliss go from Ole Miss to LSU? Does Austin Simmons then elevate at Ole Miss? There's a lot of playoff dominoes here. I've been talking also about Alabama. Keelan Russell, number one quarterback in the country last year. I heard he looks great in practice. He's going to need to play. Ty Simpson kind of slowed down a little bit after a fast start. I don't know if he's able to go pro. We'll see what happens with the playoff, but he might not be in a position to go pro. Do we see a Dylan Gabriel, Jackson Arnold situation where, the five-star quarterback pushes out the veteran? I keep calling him Dominic after his dad, but Dylan Raiola from Nebraska, he entered the portal. I've seen him linked to Louisville, which is a Adidas school. He's somebody who's well-traveled but very productive. Actually has very good stats from last year on a Nebraska team. So we'll see where that one goes. But this is going to be a very, very interesting domino. T-Love saying that Todd McShay says Moore is returning to Oregon, met with the family and everything. We'll see what happens after these playoffs. Darian Mensah, who would have been a domino, he's staying at Duke. That was just announced. So I'll just say, look at how all these things interact. Carson Beck came together late for the Canes, obviously worked out for us. Cam Ward was targeted early, but that was a process going back and forth with the NFL. So we'll have to see how this whole thing plays out. I continue to monitor CJ Bailey, who plays here at 2:30. So that's going to be something to monitor. What happens with him? He already said he's going to meet with his family after the game. A lot of dominoes. But again, I keep going to the Alabama one, because if Ty Simpson does not go pro, we want those guys to stay in college, by the way. I mean, maybe not for next year's playoff competition, but I'd like to see Ty Simpson stay in college. I'd like to see Dante Moore stay in college. First of all, that elevates Carson Beck, gives him a chance to move up the draft boards, which would be happy to see that for a lot of reasons. But that could lead that takes two teams off the market, and it gives Alabama a surplus with Ty Simpson and Keelan Russell. There's some talk about Ty Simpson having a herniated disc. That is, I've heard that too, but I mean, he's playing. So if he was that banked up, they'd use Keelan Russell. They're already in the playoffs, over almost 1,200 plus live on the show. Appreciate you guys, but just something to monitor. But Josh Hoover, really good player, live arm, can move around, talented guy. I think more of a college player than a pro. That's why he's not going pro at the moment. He's a 4-year player. He's class of 22. He could have gone pro. Same age as like Ja'Cory Brown, to use a Miami example. That's who we signed that year. So I think the fact that he's not going pro, he's maybe just more of a college guy, but very talented, thrown a ton of footballs, has a ton of experience. So we'll see where he lands. But like I said, if it's chalk, and a lot of times these things are worked out in advance, so you got to trust the buzz a little bit. If he is actually signed, sealed, delivered to Indiana, where he almost signed out of high school, if Sorsby signed, sealed, delivers to Texas Tech, the schools you're monitoring are Oregon, in terms of guys that are in the playoffs right now, Oregon, Ole Miss, Alabama. Because Ole Miss, if Trinidad Chambliss follows Lane Kiffin and the offensive staff to LSU, maybe they elevate Austin Simmons. Now Ole Miss is out of the portal market, right? That would be significant. And LSU would be out of the portal market, which would be significant. If Dante Moore comes back, now Oregon's out. See how the Alabama thing sorts out. These are the things that you're monitoring. Will that lead a Sam Levitt to Miami? I'm not sure, but Sam Levitt's list that he put out yesterday, not him personally, but, agents talk, and this was from a reputable source on 3 Rivals. They were saying Indiana, Oregon, LSU for Levitt right now. But again, if Hoover goes to Indiana, cross them off. If Dante Moore comes back, cross them off. If Trinidad Chambliss goes to LSU, cross them off. So these are all the dominoes, and we're going to keep following all these things, because even if they don't directly impact Miami, and I'm not sure Miami's in it for Hoover, I haven't heard that. Maybe they are. but all these things will impact Miami because only one quarterback is going to start. So you always got to watch the dominoes. You got to watch the coaching search dominoes, right? Someone takes the Michigan job. What dominoes does that lead to? We've been talking about Alabama. What happens if Kalen DeBoer actually takes that Michigan job, as has been rumored? Whole thing kind of moves around. So keep an eye on all of these situations. We will continue to monitor the portal. We're watching CJ Bailey here at 2:30 and watching all of these games in the playoffs, because I think the playoffs are going to have more of an impact on the portal market than people think. So again, appreciate everybody watching us. While we were live, some really unfortunate news, as you see here. Dan Alden saying prayers to our guy, Marcus Allen. Marcus Allen, talented forward, Missouri transfer, Miami native for the Miami Hurricanes. I saw the tweet, the comments, and I pulled up here. Marcus apparently was diagnosed, and I'm just reading this now. This has happened during the show, with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, has begun chemotherapy. Obviously praying for him and his family. There's a GoFundMe to support him and his recovery. So I will retweet the link on the official CanesInSight Twitter. So check that out. And if you can help, please do. And keep him in your prayers and your thoughts. Let's just really think about Marcus Allen. Things are bigger than sports, bigger than basketball. Not the news that you want to see, but we have seen athletes deal with this and even come back to perform and play at a high level. So obviously all of our thoughts and prayers are with Marcus Allen and his family. So it's just let's hope that one goes well, and let's do what we can to support him and his family in a time of need. Again, I'm going to retweet that link so you can go ahead and see those. All right, let's end this on a positive note here. And again, we'll monitor Marcus during his recovery. We'll see him on the court again. I am confident. I'm positive on that. We've seen it happen before, and tough player, guy that really was doing some really nice things on the court, and if he the way he competes on the court, I'm sure he's going to be fighting even harder with this thing. So yeah, man, just praying for him and hope that goes well. Steve talking about the portal here as we shift gears, looking for quarterbacks, get more defensive linemen. Defensive linemen, there are some in the portal. Those are expensive, though. So the good thing is we have a lot of homegrown guys that you can pay, that you can retain. Will cost a lot of money, but Justin Scott, Armando Blunt, Marquise Lightfoot, Hayden Lowe, Herbert Scroggins, got to develop some of these guys. Of course, Ahmad Moten, who was already all ACC and has continued to develop. A lot of comments on CJ Bailey and getting him heavy. Talk about Islas Canadias, Lomelos, getting him plenty of options to develop him and get some weight on him. I think that the reason I've been such a CJ Bailey, proponent is because I think his floor is high. He's already a good ACC passer. Like right now, as a true sophomore, 70% passer, top 5 in most passing categories in the ACC. But the ability to get better, improve his footwork, improve his fundamentals. They've improved a lot since high school. He's on an upward trajectory. Does that continue? Gain some weight. You've seen so many of these guys from that from South Florida just gain weight and get better. So that's something I'd be monitoring with a CJ Bailey wherever he lines up. But I think Miami will be in the mix there. Tila says without Bailey, NC State was a 4-1 team. We'll see him today. I mean, one cool thing about Bailey is even if he does enter the portal, I like how he's playing the bowl game with his teammates, right? So all the off the field stuff, from what you hear from NC State, from they really want to keep him. They're fans. They've embraced him. Like, he seems like he's doing the right things off the field. I'm hoping he has a good performance, even if he goes to LSU, right, somewhere else. More good quarterbacks, more in-demand quarterbacks on the market, the better for the Miami Hurricanes. So we'll watch that. And, of course, we will be getting ready for the biggest game in 20 years. So, just something to monitor here as you try to kill the time. We'll be doing another show maybe later tonight, definitely tomorrow morning. I'll probably be on live at like 4 a.m., like wake up and make it happen. And look, this is, by the way, this is something we've been waiting 2 decades for, commemorated. College game day shirts, first round playoff shirts right there, the wear in shirt. That's pretty cool. A lot of college football essentials at the Miami Hurricane team store, Miami HTS. Insight 20 promo code gets you 20% off your first item. So all the college football playoff stuff, plus the Malachi Tony number 10 jersey, the hottest item in town. They are selling out just as fast as they're making them at the Miami Hurricane team store right across the street from the Thesis Hotel, Miami HTS. CanesInSight.com. Use promo code INSIGHT20. Get 20% off your first item. Shout out to Harry and the boys. Shout out to everyone in the chat. Over 1,250 people live right now. Remember to like and subscribe to the show. Go Canes.